much for inviting me. I appreciate it. It's been quite a while since I've given a talk about Burns Bog, and to be quite honest with you, about 28 years ago I knew nothing about it. So please, if you want to ask questions, feel free to, because I've probably already asked them somewhere along the line. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't. It's called the lungs of the Lower Mainland, and our honorary chair, David Bellamy, is the one that really got it, people calling it that. When he came here, I can't remember, it was 96 he first came. Well, he's getting very elderly, at least 5 years older than me. But he's one of the people that really started the movement in UK and Ireland to start researching and studying peat bogs. He will tell you about, he was a high school dropout, then he met the amazing Rosemary, who became his future wife. And he decided he better do something with his life, so he went back to university, and he met an Irish priest and said, you know, you should be studying peat bogs. So what he did, he took up research on that. He proposed to the amazing Rosemary in a bog in Surrey, UK. And he completed his doctoral thesis on his honeymoon.
Wow.
And it's called Bellamy's World, or Bellamy's Ireland. And I happen to have the original artwork because there's 4 panels in it. He gave it to me to use it as a fundraiser, but I felt nobody would really appreciate them here. So somehow or other, I'm going to try and repatriate them back to Ireland and maybe make some money on them in the meantime, because I think people would appreciate them. I believe his book is out of print, but he's a very interesting fellow. I have to tell you about him because I wish I could imitate him. He is about 6'4", 6'6". His goal as a young child was to become a ballet dancer, and when he hit 14, that ended that. So, as I said, knew nothing 28 years ago about it, and a group of us got together. And there's some propaganda about myself. I've ended up with all sorts of awards. I even have got an honorary doctorate last year from Kwantlen Polytechnic. And I have to tell you that when Alan Davis phoned me, he said, would you be willing to accept an honorary degree? I said, oh, sure. And then for the whole weekend, I'm trying to figure out what kind of a degree it is. Because I thought, you know, because I've never heard of an honorary master's or anything, so I finally asked somebody, I said, oh, it's a doctorate. So I had to give the speech, and I did my best to keep people laughing, because I knew the kids were not there. Okay. Now, Burns Bog, it was founded by a group of about 20 people, and the reason it was founded by 20 people and not 10 is because I thought all the 10 signatories had to have a separate authorizing name, signature. So that's why we say it started by 20 people. And it was a result that there was a development proposal that came forward January 1988. And the year before, I had been made aware of it by Steve Zloblowski. Steve grew up in Stevenson, played in the Fraser River. He was a fisheries technician, and he understood the relationship between the Fraser River and fish, but he never got around to explaining it. I had to go to an international conference in Scotland to find that one out. But we were lucky. We at that time.
Was that the racetrack development?
Well, that was another one.
Yeah.
That was,
I remember
yeah,
that.
yeah. The one in '88 was to develop all 5,500 acres. You know, put it under 20 feet of landfill. Well, they were going to have a park which was already there, the Delta Nature Reserve, and they were also going to have what they call a STOL, short takeoff and landing airport, where the old peat plant is. You know, along the 72nd, if you know the area. That was turned down 5-2, and Doug Husband, who was the mayor at the time, was one of the people that opposed it. But at the time, my husband Wally, who's now passed away, we were members of the Delta Toastmasters Club 1924. And because it was a new club, we were mentored. And the mentor said, you know, that when a club starts, everybody's enthusiastic and, you know, all there. And then you know, people drift away. And if you can slowly keep the organization going through that sort of lull, then it'll begin to grow. So based on that knowledge, after the proposal was turned down, we got together because we knew we'd won the battle, but not the war. We still haven't, we're working on that. And so we start as the Burns Bog Conservation Society. And the reason it's so long-winded is because we were calling ourselves the Burns Bog Committee. Well, when we tried to register a Burns Bog Committee, they said, no, you can't register a committee. It has to be an association or a society. So to keep the BBC going, it became Conservation Society. And I'm glad we used the term conservation because it means wise use. Whereas you people think of preservation, you know, keep it staying static. And if you want to keep a bog healthy or any healthy, it has to be growing and, you know, being kept alive, and otherwise it'll die. So some of the things we do is really focus on education, and I brought a couple of our books that are for teachers. I've given the one for Pete's sake to a number of adults, and they've loved reading it. And a few other books, and we're very good at, you know, brochures. We also do summer day camps, we do field trips. We've created a new program called Stepping into Nature that's for the second year. It was a 4-day event. Each day there were about 100 students, and they went through various stations and that. And, you know, half would go through something in the morning, and then they'd switch and they'd go into the others. And it was quite a success. So we're planning on doing it again. There was about 1,200 children that wanted to come. We got 387. Partly because first we were going to pay for the buses. And because we were short of money, we had to back out on that, so some of the students couldn't come. The year before it was 407. So we work with other organizations. We have a lot of contacts internationally. I'm on the Peatlands D group, which has such organizations, which is Wetlands International, which I discovered is partially funded by the Canadian government, and it's in the Netherlands. The Netherlands are very committed to saving bogs. In fact, the Irish Peatland Conservation Council, which is 5 years older than us, got started by a fellow called Matthias Schouten, a Dutchman, and he came over to Holland and realized if they didn't do something that all their peat bogs would be gone. So he set up a foundation exclusively in the Netherlands to fund and buy peat bogs in Ireland. Okay, now I've got something here that, okay, there is the bog. Now remember, this is not the original size. I always talk about the real original size, which was between 10 and 12,000 acres. And it even came down and wrapped around Panorama Ridge, if you know the area there. The Delta Golf Course is on Burns Bog. So there's the landfill. Up over here is the 72nd Avenue, and in that little wedge over there is the Delta Nature Reserve. It's about 152 acres that is open to the public, and that's where we do our field trips, our summer day camps, and our pilgrimage to Burns Bog the first Sunday after Earth Day, and a few other things. We did something this year. I don't recommend it for us seniors, but it is the latest craze for young people. Escape games. We did, usually they're done in a room, and you have to go around opening boxes and all that stuff and solving them, and then, you know, the last one you usually win a prize or something. We did ours out in the Delta Nature Reserve the weekend of Halloween. The weather was just something else. It was exciting. We had 183 people.
And you said the landfill is on that map?
Yes, right down the corner there.
Oh, that's it.
Right there.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
says landfill.
Yeah. And it's not next to Burns Bog, it is in Burns Bog. Now, it is apparently the largest undeveloped urban landmass in North America, and that's what other people say, so I guess they're right. But it's also very fascinating because of its size and its location. It is the largest raised peat bog on the west coast of North America, and it is also considered an estuarine raised peat bog and may be the only one left in the world. Estuarine because it's at the mouth of the Fraser, and it's also considered the only major raised peat bog in a Mediterranean climate. We consider our climate Mediterranean.
And raised means what?
It is somewhere, depending on, like in the wintertime when there's a lot of water, it's about 20 feet higher in the center.
Oh,
It shrinks in the summertime because sphagnum moss shrinks. And when you're walking in, and it's been years since I've been in, but when you're walking in, you don't notice the slight elevation. But when you get into the center and you look back, you realize that you are higher in the center. There's also a story that First Nations said that the cranberries in the bog used to get bigger and bigger as they got closer to the center, and the spirits then would change the women into spirits or some such thing. So I say if you ever get into the bog, you're changed forever.
yeah, we are correct in referring to it as a carbon sink?
Oh yes,
Yes, okay.
absolutely. I don't know if to be quite honest with you, Allie had to leave the office and she did this at home and sent this to me. So this is my first look at it. But there's a scientist from Germany has done one of those little things that you watch on your computer.
YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube. And he talks about, and we're assuming he's talking about a European soccer field because they're apparently different sizes. And soccer field holds the equivalent of the same amount of carbon as if you ran your car around the world 3 times. So that gives you an idea. It stores 10 times more carbon than a tropical rainforest. And how I got on the education role, I was an ESL teacher in Surrey, and this teacher came to me, very earnestly, I want you to teach the kids about the rainforest. We've got to save them. And I'm thinking, what about Burns Bog? So I had a lot of teachers help me with the very first teacher's guide. I have to admit, my youngest daughter did a lot of work with another teacher and a couple of other people to do our latest one for Pete's sake. This sphagnum moss here is fascinating because it doesn't have roots. It was here in the days of the dinosaurs. And one of the things we teach the children if they get lost and they need water, take the sphagnum moss and squeeze it, and you'll have your water. And of course, anything to kids you tell them is around when the dinosaurs were here, they get very excited. There's some pictures here of things up here. That's another picture in the central bog, which we can't go into now. By the way, I don't support the idea of no access to the conservation area. I believe in controlled access. And in the first draft, which I have a copy in our library, there was supposed to be community involvement. Our mayor is the most opposed to community involvement. Okay, up here, that looks like the fruit of the cloudberry. And by the way, there are 3 plants that I say don't go shopping across the border. Cloudberry, crowberry, and the velvet-leafed blueberry. I've seen the cloudberry and the velvet-leafed blueberry in the Delta Nature Reserve, but I've not seen the crowberry in the Nature Reserve. I have seen it in the Central Bog. And that's hardhack there, that's on the edge in the Nature Reserve. And here's some of the animals that they support. One of them, and if you notice our logo has a crane on it. We chose that because Burns Bog was one of, I think at one time, I think there's a few other places now, one of 2 places where the sandhill cranes nest and raise their young. Now, whether they're still doing it in the Central Bog, I have no idea. I know some of them are raising their young over at Rifle. And the other place is in the Pitt Meadows area. We have only about 20 or 30 left. It is a major staging area for the lower mainland cranes. You will find in the fall anywhere between 20 and 30. That will be fine. I've seen pictures of them even lately. And we've got
Did you just say the type of crane that is?
sandhill.
Yes.
Yeah. There are 15 species worldwide, and half of them are either threatened or endangered. And we've got a book there. Dragonflies, we've got some interesting dragonflies. There's 2 subarctic species that are only found in Burns Bog in the lower mainland. And of course we've got beavers, and we've got different owls, and we've got deer, if they haven't all been killed on the South Fraser Permanent Road. At one count there was well over 70 or more that have been killed. Now, we did get 5,000 acres purchased in 2004. Unfortunately, 500 was left out of it, and that's what we're still fighting for. And then in 2005, it was an ecological conservancy, and you have to have a special permit. And I've even known of scientists who have been denied access, which I think is ridiculous. But the mayor and I disagree on those. 2012. It became a Ramsour site as part of the Fraser River Delta Ramsour site, number 243. Now, Ramsour is not an acronym. It comes from the name of the town or city in Iran, Ramsour, where they held the very first convention on wetlands of international importance. And the push to get Burns Bog protected and become a Ramsour site started actually in 1995 at an International Peat Society Congress. David Bellamy had talked me into going there, and out of 200 scientists, there was 2 non-scientists. But I've been corresponding so much with the people from the Irish Peatland Conservation Council. It was like meeting old friends there. And I still have some posters that we had printed, and it has pictures of Burns Bog, and I forget how many. They were heavy, and I packed them so that I had no idea how many people were there, but I took enough so that every guest speaker got one. And resolutions came out that Burns Bog either be purchased or expropriated, and then it become a Ramsour site. And I've been back to another conference, and I have a feeling that might be the only one they ever had resolutions come out of it. Because you see, it's a combination of peatland scientists and peatland harvesters or farmers or whatever you want to call them that, remove peat for, gardening or whatever. For peat's sake, don't use peat in your gardens. Use the cocoa earth. It solves two environmental problems. Keeps peat where it belongs, and cocoa earth can come over here in at a cheap rate because we're shipping everything that way instead of this way. And it solves the problem in Indonesia. You just have to make sure you get it in an area that it doesn't have a lot of salt in it. So, yes, climate change, it plays a very important role, and it's very poorly understood. I cringe every time I hear somebody talking about carbon credits. They should be using those carbon credits to buy our peat bogs, because a press release came out in December 7th, 2007, I've got it memorized, from the United Nations. And that report states the cheapest and most efficient way to reduce climate change is to save our peat bogs. And by the way, if you wonder why the fire in Fort McMurray was so bad, it was because peat was on fire, and it is still burning in spots. So there's some of the things. There talks about the Delta Nature Reserve. We have funded and built all the boardwalks in the Delta Nature Reserve. The corporation has done no funding. I've been writing letters because the pathway along the creek is being washed away. But when you phone Delta, they say it's somebody else's problem. and you phone Metro Parks, and they say, well, no, we're still waiting to get control of it. I think Delta likes the power. That's why they're reluctant to find the final papers to let Metro Vancouver take it over. But if we hadn't done that, there'd be no access. And I have to tell you what got us going to start doing this in '94, and the history of this. In the 70s, there was a group called the Burns Bog Protection Society, and they were instrumental in getting this area set aside as an outdoor classroom, but they drifted away and they didn't continue to maintain it. Well, I happened to hear that one of our counselors said that the nature reserve was a goner, and it's nothing like being told something's gone that you're trying to save to activate you. So we had Gordon Smith on our board at the time, and he worked for GVRD Parks, so he was able to get permission from Parks and Delta, and basically they told us, do what you want, just don't ask for money. So the first thing we did is we cut back the brush of the old trails. Now we've now extended it. We have 2 half-circle boardwalks and a connector, so that, you know, if you get tired or you can't, you know, whatever reason it's flooded along the creek, you can take the connector. One of our volunteers wouldn't work on the connector, but he helped maintain the rest. He didn't want the connector, but I'm glad we've put it in. Now, this is the current threats here. That is, all that blue is part of the missing 500 acres. And it's owned by now a consortium called MK Delta. What happened in 2004, while we were sitting in court to have the mortgages foreclosed on, Jack Matthews, originally from Ontario, a good friend of the McLaughlin family, you know, Grouse Mountain's up for sale now, and he's now moved to Dallas because then his company was Southwest Dallas, stepped in and took over the negotiations, and because of the way the ecosystem review was written at that time, he figured that he could keep these pieces and develop them and refused to give them up. Now, I can assure you, even though the ecosystem review of 2000 was wonderful, it would not be written that way now because we know so much more. And it wouldn't even be written that way if Charlotte McAllister, University of Newcastle, she was a doctoral student at the time, she got a grant to come over to study hydrology in Burns Bog. So when, I can't remember which one it was now, I think it was the racetrack and all that kind of stuff, and cutting the bog in 1/3 and 2/3, that they backed off, and several of us organizations got together and talked to Ian Waddell, who was the Minister of Environment, to do the ecosystem review. And I made it clear that I would not accept anybody in the Lower Mainland, because I said I know they're not peat scientists. Some of them have studied it, you know, sort of kind of fell into it. They thought so little of the hydrology of the bog that they asked Charlotte to come and give her presentation. They didn't ask her to return for the plenary session. And all through that plenary session, Richard Hebda kept saying, we need the hydrologist here, we need the hydrologist here. See, Richard Hebda is a botanist, plant guy. Peat bogs are about 98% water. In fact, there's a quote from the Irish Peatland Conservation Council that states, there are more solids in a pint of milk than there is in a pint of peat. Because, you know, a good healthy bog is full of water. So you can see those pieces. Now, what's happening here? The big piece and the little piece over there at the top by Highway 91, it's about 155 acres, equivalent to about 95 European soccer fields. They want to convert that to an industrial site, and then they will promise to give up these 2 other pieces. Okay? When they started talking about developing these 2 pieces, there was a great furor, and they backed off. Now somebody said maybe that was their plan, to see what they could get away with there. and then sort of, okay, we'll give these pieces up if you give us those. And they've got, you can go on to their website, MK Delta Lands, and take a look. Some of their scientists have done some good research. But as a society, knowing what we know, we cannot support that. We need, in this day and age with climate change, to save every square inch of our peatlands. And, you know, I was trying to write an appeal letter today, and I wanted to do a comparison with Burns Bog and Fort McMurray. And when I was talking over, somebody said, people know so little about what was really burning in Fort McMurray that they wouldn't understand it. But some of that peat went down 12 feet. And last Saturday, in the Vancouver Sun, in the National Post section, there was another article. There's still hot spots. It's still burning because it's carbon. You know, some people say peat is the next step before you turn it into coal. You know, and it's all plant matter. And of course, when you start fooling around with it, you start releasing methane. And it was in the 90s, I met a professor, his name is Evel, I don't know if he's still alive or not, Evel Gorham. And I think he had dual citizenship, and I think he was at the University of Minnesota. And he was expressing concern about what would happen to the peatlands or the muskeg in the north with climate change. And his big fear was they would catch on fire and just burn and burn. So that gives you an idea where it is. And you can see up there where the Delta Nature Reserve is. And it was really interesting. When the Corporation of Delta started sending out pictures about the proposed development on this lot being C, they forgot to mention that the lot above it and the lot below it, or the little green one there, are all in the conservation area. You know, they said it was at AOR. And by the way, that piece is zoned agriculture. Now, I hope it never becomes agriculture, but it's certainly preferable to cement and that kind of stuff. And in fact, I am hoping, I've got a few flyers there, I did them in a hurry. I've got the Agriculture Land Commission's email address. I just checked their website. So far it doesn't seem like Delta has presented their proposal to have this rezoned. We're fighting it there. We're encouraging everybody. We're working on the Chinese water torture method right now. You know, keep sending in emails to them. I sent them copies of over 2,000 names on petitions. Found it interesting when they were reading out names at the Corporation of Delta, they missed out the names of the international scientists who had written in opposition. Okay, so I've told you all that now. Okay. And it's exclusionary zoning. Okay. They need all this kind of stuff. So, results of the assessment, I think I've talked, there's detrimental effects of the industrial project on fish habitat, and also some rather rare dragonflies, some birds. Some of them I didn't even know existed here until I started reading some of it. And the creek in the Delta Nature Reserve, it's got several names because what happened, I think it was in the 40s or sometime, the farmers didn't like the fact that Cougar Creek would overflow in the East Delta, so they blocked it and dug this ditches, which is now called Lower Cougar Canyon Creek, Davis Creek, or Interceptor Canal, but there are fish in there, and the people that did their escapes, that they were watching the fish going up the stream. So there's a lot of stuff there. Alia, you can tell she's fresh out of university. She uses a lot more words. So keep it brief, folks. But here, only known, there's a black swift population there. And I didn't even know they're there because, you know, I'm too busy trying to save the bog. I don't have time to go and do this stuff. So thanks to MK Delta for doing all this research for us. And you know, we've got to look after everything. You know, there's a real concern worldwide by our frogs are disappearing. I remember, I dread to think how my kids used to go and get frog eggs and dump them. And at one time we were up at Simon Fraser when I was going to university, and my kids were going out and getting frog eggs and dumping them in the pond up there. But, you know, once you start squeezing the water out of peat, then it becomes dry, and it no longer can function. The advantage, if they have to turn it into farmland, is it can be converted back. But, you know, it would take a number of years. But it has already been converted back because it was in the 80s, and this is almost, you know, 40 years later, that it has regrown because, you know, peat was taken off of it. In fact, some of the peat was used in the Second World War. And I don't know if we still have southern back bowls because, to the best of my knowledge, they were where the South Fraser Perimeter Road was, over where the animal hospital place used to be. And as far as I know, they just plowed right over them.
When you look at the bog from the air, it looks like you can see shadows of agricultural fields. Were those agricultural fields or were those peat harvesting?
It was peat. They used 3 different methods. And the ones that look like it's fields are their strips.
Yeah.
That's one method. They left the strips and then took the peat in between. And I've forgotten now the different kinds they did. There was one that what they did is that, and there's, if they haven't been burned, they used pipes and turned it into a slurry, and they pumped it over to either the factory at 72nd, there was one other too, and then they would dry it. It was wooden pipes. And there's still machinery there, I guess.
Yeah. So what we see is the old peat fields that are just partially obscured.
Yes.
The trees grow so slowly.
Yeah. And they're growing faster now because of climate change. So this gives you a lot of detail of different plants that will be, you know, threatened: cloudberry, bog rosemary, and the velvet leaf blueberry. Anyhow, see how much more she's got here. And then, since that all species will tolerate changes that are within the plant's natural tolerance limits. However, the same document goes on to say that the effect to ecological communities from habitat loss to site preparation and construction activities is permanent. Habitat and plant species would be permanently lost. So, you know, we're going to lose a treasure here. And with climate change upon us, as I said earlier, we can't afford to lose a square inch of our peatland. Now, you know, MK says, well, it's been disturbed, but you know what? It's also proven that it can, left alone, it can regrow. We wouldn't have such a healthy plant and animal population out in that area if it hadn't. And I'm trying to drive this with a few acres. You know, there's other things going on too. The trucks, overnight commercial truck stop on land adjacent to Lot 4. I wonder why. And this project could encourage other development in the area. What's next? A marine jetty, a bridge. You know, folks, there's been a lot of talk about LNG, and I don't, it's not covered here. But we have an LNG plant in Delta, and it is increased. And you know, if an airplane happened to hit it, might not have any Burns Bog anymore. Fraser River might have a huge lake. Our mayor, everybody's in favor, you know, it's fair. She's in favor. They supported the increase of it. And the irony is the old LNG plant has sort of a basin around it, so if anything leaks, it leaks into that basin. The new one doesn't. One of our board members has worked with LNG up in Fort St. John, and it is cool to minus 260 or something that you can't even fathom. I mean, if you touch it at that temperature, you're freeze-dried immediately. And of course, you can be French-dried if it blows up. I'll take the choice. One of the things that has really been brought to my attention by Wetlands International, you're Americans, but that's okay. My mother was one too. She was, even my dogs come from San Diego. They're little rescues. She was born in Oklahoma. And I understand my niece has been doing research. I'm very distantly related to William Henry Harrison, that gave the longest inaugural speech. And he's the shortest serving president. I keep that in mind when I'm talking. Anyhow, I digress. Canadians were so relieved when Justin Trudeau said he was, signing on, stepping up to the plate with all this protection with the United Nations. Well, the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, 2030, has 17 goals. 7 of the 17 goals affect wetlands, one way or another. So how can you honor that and continue to destroy wetlands? Now I understand, I haven't been able to get the information, but I understand that, I think it was the Manitoba government, when it was NDP, brought in legislation to protect its wetlands, but they went out of power before it was enacted, and Ducks Unlimited is now trying to urge the Manitoba government to enact that legislation. By the way, Ducks Unlimited was started by wealthy Texans who realized that if they didn't look after the ducks in Canada, they'd have nothing to shoot. And they are a very powerful group. Okay, anything else that I can add, or have I put you to sleep yet?
What effect did the fire have on the bog?
Well, from a PR perspective, it woke a lot of people up to be aware that we have a bog. Same thing in 1996, and it was almost 20 years to the date. The 96 one was July 4th, this was July 23rd. I got phone calls in our office from people who said, I've lived all my life in Vancouver and never knew the bog existed. So that's the good thing. Also the good thing is they got it out the way they did, because they were sweating buckets because it was close to the industrial site area there, and there's a lot of chemicals, etc. And not that far over, on the river's edge, is Fortis's LNG.
Ooh, okay.
So if things started exploding in Tilbury, you can be sure that there would be a good possibility that there could have been something. Now, I saw the mayor, her face was white when she was on television, and for good reason.
I can tell you that as we watched from where I live, the beginning smoke, nobody knew what it was, and aircraft were circling around or something. Neighbors where I live immediately identified that, that's the Burns Bog was burning.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no ignorance of the bog here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I was very impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done a good job of educating people. We just have to continue and do an even better job, because there's still lots of people that don't know its value.
What impact, if any, do you anticipate there will be on the bog with the replacement of the Massey Tunnel, this bridge?
I've been getting a lot of stuff from a group called Fraser Voices, and you may want to, Susan Jones is on that list. A number of them, Doug Massey. It will have some indirect impact. Some of the concerns is that what do they call it, the salt water wedge that goes up the Fraser. That will have an impact on farmland. Oh, by the way, MK Delta has promised to give $10 million to the farmers on Western Island. if they can convert that 155 acres. And I think, what arrogance. Yeah. Doing it for west of Ireland, but you're not doing anything to the people in North Delta that will be directly impacted. Anyhow, that's my rant. I think there's going to be some indirect, maybe not direct, but definitely indirect impacts. You know, some of these things you don't know what's going to happen until it happens.
But saltwater intrusion would be
Yes,
a problem.
I think so. Because, you see, the water in the bog is acidic
Okay.
because of the sphagnum moss, and because it's acidic, that's why all the plants are preserved, and they don't, well, there is some decay, but mainly the majority of it doesn't decay. And by the way, if you want to save money when you go to the other side, just have somebody drop you in the bog and you'll be preserved forever. We haven't found any bodies. There's one fellow that tried getting his wife buried there, but he made a mistake. Instead of using green plastic, he used orange. So,
I remember that. I have a list of people that know.
yeah. Any other questions?
What was the peat used for? Fertilizer, gunpowder?
Yeah, and even bandages. You know, that's another thing. If you're out in a bog and for whatever reason you get yourself injured, put sphagnum moss on it because it's antiseptic, has uric acid in it, and it also absorbs, very absorbent. I have never heard of a native baby having diaper rash, and they used sphagnum moss for their diapers and stuff. It's a fascinating plant. I've heard that in Germany, that in some of their spas, they have peat baths. And for people with arthritis, and for some reason you can endure a higher temperature of water in a peat bath.
Oh?
Yeah, I haven't tried it yet.
Huh?
Yeah, and it was used, somehow or other, it was used as part of the filtration system to get the magnesium out of the ore and stuff, because they wanted the magnesium to build the aircraft because magnesium is so light. But also they used the wadding for a while in bullets, and then they got other stuff. And then after that it's used for gardening. And that's the least efficient use of peat going, because within about 4 years it's out of your garden and the carbon's back into the atmosphere. You know, compost and, like I say, coconut fiber is a good alternative.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to compliment your group on what you've done with the nature reserve,
Oh,
as well
thank
as
you.
with public awareness. And we've been going regularly to the nature reserve for 10 years or longer. We just love it. We always take visitors there.
Our membership is open to anybody,
Yeah.
and of course we love American money right now.
But I also like, you're trying to improve the signage as well as the paths.
Yeah.
And I think that's very helpful for
Yeah.
people who
You notice there's some there that we need to take apart.
Yeah.
But we need volunteers if you want to come and volunteer. My husband passed away a few years ago. He was the one that took over the management of the committee in the Delta Nature Reserve. And of course, you know, he may have been too tired to do some gardening, but or housework, but until the last week before he passed away, he wasn't too tired to go down in the Delta Nature Reserve. And he loved it. He could not build anything, but he could build the boardwalk, and he was so proud of it. So that's why, if you see the name on Davy Duke and one of the benches in there, that's him. And all that, we've done all the funding. Delta Cedar has been giving us a lot of wood lately, but there still needs to be, you know, the maintenance of it. So if anybody has a hammer or two, like, you give me a call. And there's a fellow that is doing some work, but he doesn't have a truck. And so if you've got a truck that you don't mind hauling wood in once in a while, that can be useful as well. And our office is behind the Greek Village restaurant at the corner of 80th and Scott.
When you mentioned the possible problem with the bridge to replace the massive tunnel, did those people, is there anyone making interface with those people to tell them that the dredging needs to be sufficient so that the salt water doesn't go?
My impression is some of them are engineers, and you know, you can do anything as an engineer. Doesn't mean that you should do it. You know, and all this stuff started 20, 30 years ago before any of us were even aware of it. And it's being pushed by Port Metro, Vancouver. It's being pushed by the government. It's even pushed by companies that, you know, and from Saskatchewan and all those places don't understand the impact of all that stuff on Delta and the Fraser River. You know, there is even a theory that some people are hoping all the salmon will be killed, and then they say, well, you know, there's no salmon left, so we're going to have to farm them. And I don't know about you, I don't eat farmed fish. You cannot can it because it goes to mush. And I stay away from it because a couple times I've eaten it and I have felt ill afterwards, and I'm allergic to penicillin.
Actually, Olson, you're commenting on dredging. Dredging is planned, but not for that reason. They're wanting to deepen the channel.
Yeah.
Well, whatever reason, I mean, if that would have that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see, the reason why they want to get rid of that tunnel is it was the tunnel that stopped the development in '88, because the ships, the Panamax ships, could not go over the tunnel except at high tide. So they want to make the ships going right up, you know, right to Surrey docks, all the way up. You know, sometimes we have to say no. And when you're saying no, I believe you're saying yes to something else.
Another problem with the tunnel is that almost every day it backs all the way up to the Oak Street Bridge.
Yeah, well, you see,
Virtual too.
they could drop another tunnel, and it would be far less expensive to drop another tunnel.
Yes.
And they've been doing those in Holland, and I've heard that there was a Dutch company that, I'm going to sit down now, that approached the government with an offer to build another tunnel. And they never got back to them because that didn't fit into their plans. And if you talk to Bill van der Zam, they were looking at that when he was premier. And when they quoted the price that it would cost, he thought they didn't know what they were talking about because it was so low. And one of the reasons we only have 2 laneways both ways now is that when they originally were going to build it, they were going to put 3 laneways. The council, Delta Council of the day, did not want that because they didn't want a lot of people coming into Delta and impacting the farmland. And of course, let's not get on to the Tawasin Treaty. I have a niece that is Cree, and she's studying Aboriginal law, and she says that treaty is the worst thing going. She can't believe they signed it. But it was used to pull land out of the ALR.
Used to do what?
Pull land out of the ALR.
Okay.
They lost a lot of rights. They cannot speak up. They cannot oppose any roads going through their land. They cannot speak up for the bog. So, anything else? Thank you very much.